Hi everyone, I'm Jody Vandermeer. I'm one of the registered dietitians with Meyer, and today our cooking class is sponsored by California Walnut. So super excited to have them sponsor this. We've got three great recipes coming up here. Um, just to give a little background on walnuts, so 99% of the walnuts that are grown in the US come from California. So that is majority of all of our walnuts here in the United States. And at Meyer, all of our walnuts come from California. So here, just to highlight, this is one of our cool variety packs we have in store right now. They're the whole walnuts. So I thought that was kind of fun picking those up for the holiday season. But we also have a variety of different walnuts, from chopped to whole, halves. So whatever your recipe calls for, we have. So we're going to get started with our first recipe here in making mini walnut apple pie. These are absolutely delicious. They're low in sugar. They only have a tablespoon of sugar in the whole recipe. And so we'll get started with those. So in a skillet, you'll want to get a tablespoon of butter melted. Get this in here and get that melted. And then to that melted butter, I'm going to add in here, I have a little bit of nutmeg and clove, and it's about an eighth of a teaspoon for both of those. And then a quarter teaspoon of cinnamon, and then 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. So we'll add that to our melting butter. Make sure I get all those spices out too. We'll kind of let that simmer, turn this down a little bit, and get all of those seasonings into our melted butter here. You'll see your butter will start to bubble, and that's perfectly fine. We want to see it caramelize a little bit. And then we are going to add our 100% apple juice. And this is just about a third of a cup. And then 1 Granny Smith apple. You could use Honeycrisp, you can use whatever type of apple you'd like. This just kind of gives it that tart flavoring to that apple pie. I'm gonna quick give it a peel here. And some just to highlight some nutrition facts about walnuts. So a serving size of walnuts is about an ounce. And so if you think about that, it's about a palmful in your hand, or if you're eating halves, it's about 12 to 16 halves of a walnut, or halves of walnuts. So that's about a serving size. And with that, there is 4 grams of protein and 2 grams of fiber. So both of those things are great for helping us stay full longer, help with our satiety. So walnuts are just a great snack, and easy to pack if you're traveling or looking for an easy snack to bring in your lunch and eat between meals. One thing here is to make sure when you're cutting your apple, I'll show you here in a second. You want to make sure that your slices are decently small because you're going to be cutting these into little phyllo dough cups. So you don't want like a huge chunk of apple because one, we want them to cook relatively quick. And then two, we don't want like a huge chunk of that apple in there because you want to get a good mixture of the apple to walnut in your phyllo dough. Okay, we'll finish getting this put up and then we will add this to our spice juice mixture. And one thing about this recipe, as was making it earlier today, I was thinking this would be such a great dessert to bring to a holiday party, or if you have a work event going on. It's got that warm flavoring from the spices. And then the tartness from the apple. So I think it just really encompasses the holiday season. All right, I'm gonna get this apple thrown into our skillet here. We want to cook this down for about 15 minutes to make sure that apple gets nice and soft in this seasoning, in this mixture, and make sure that we're coating it with the spices in the skillet here. So I'm going to turn this up a little bit, and while this cooks, we'll stir it every so often. We'll move on to our second recipe and come back to this once our apples are cooked down. So I'm going to move this over to the side, just so we can see what we're doing here. And we will start our next recipe while those apples cook down. So this is also another good recipe that we're going to make here next. That is a great appetizer you could bring to a holiday party. So this one is a grape, California walnut, sage compote. Really easy to cook together and whip it together and throw it over some brie. And then you can mix it with, if you want, like bread or crackers, completely up to you. But the crunch of the walnuts adds some great flavor and texture to the brie that is that smooth, creamy. So let me grab our brie. You can see here that I've already cut some bread up here. The one thing with this recipe is you want to make sure your brie is at room temperature. So in our bowl, I've got 1/4 cup of our chopped up walnuts. I've got a 1/4 cup of some sliced grapes. I just quartered the grapes, so they're kind of long and skinny. And then, second, a teaspoon of honey. And then 1 teaspoon of balsamic vinegar. So this will also kind of give it some acidity, but a little bit of sweetness with the acidity. And then I have 4 fresh sage leaves here that I'm going to give just a rough chop. So what I like to do is roll these up and then be able to chop them that way so you get some nice, you won't get like huge chunks of sage. It'll be nicely julienned. All right. And I'm going to throw that into our compote we're making right here. This smells so fragrant and delicious. I wish you could smell it through the computer. All right, I'm gonna whip the compote up here together. So easy as that. All of your ingredients just get thrown into a bowl. You mix it up. And just like that, I'm gonna get our brie unwrapped. So I told you a little bit about that all of our walnuts come from California. However, there's only 4,000 farms in California that grow walnuts. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The other thing is that once the tree is planted, it doesn't just start growing walnuts. It takes 5 to 7 years for that tree to start producing walnuts. So it's really an investment in time and patience to really start growing your walnuts and having a fruitful tree. All right, I've got my brie unwrapped here. And then I've got my compote. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna spoon my compote over the brie. It's okay if pieces fall off. Gives it the good Perfect. That looks beautiful. And then easy as that. That's your holiday appetizer you could bring to a party, to family event. And then I just have some French baguette here that I cut out on the side. So I think that looks delicious and very easy, less than 10 minutes to make. All right, so we're gonna set this one aside and we will keep working on our apple pie. I'm also going to give you a little nutrition information on walnuts. So they're a good source of fiber. The other thing is that they are a great source of ALA fatty acids. So that is part of our omega-3 fatty acids. It's a plant-based source, so that's another great thing. And they're a good source of magnesium, which is great for brain function, for muscle and bone health. So really, you can't go wrong with walnuts. Trying to incorporate them into your diet more. And they just add such a great crunch to different recipes, flavor, texture, definitely that nuttiness. And they can be used in a variety of ways, right? You can start your breakfast with walnuts, and if you put them in your oatmeal, you can have them at lunch to top off a salad or a soup. Or here we are making a dessert that has walnuts in them. So there's a different variety or different ways to use walnuts just beyond snacking on them. This is still cooking up a little bit. I want these apples to get pretty soft before we put them in the phyllo dough cups. But let's talk about storage. So when you're at the store and you buy your walnuts, they typically come in these bags, right? One thing you don't want to do is after you open them, throw them in your pantry. For best storage practices, if you're going to use your walnuts within the next month, it's best to keep them in the refrigerator. That keeps them more shelf stable. They don't spoil as easily. So that's one of the really big things. But if you're not going to use your walnuts right away, and it's going to be, a few months down the road that you're going to be using them, store them in an airtight container in your freezer. That will preserve them longer and really help that flavor stay within the walnut. If you go and open up your walnuts and you notice that they have a sour smell or sour taste, that's when you know that your walnuts are no longer good. So that was one thing that was really interesting to me. I knew that you had to freeze them, but I didn't know it was right away. I didn't know that it was, you could refrigerate them if you're going to use them in the next month. So that's just one of the really great tips is making sure you're storing them properly so that you aren't wasting your walnuts that you're buying. All right, our apples are getting nice and soft. It smells so fragrant in here and delicious. Here, I'll give you a little preview of what we got going on. Very cinnamony holiday seasons going on in my kitchen right now. All right, I'm going to turn this off and grab my baking sheet, and we'll move this over to the side. We're going to put them in these little phyllo dough cups. You can find these in the freezer section at the store, and they're already made little cups. Super easy, so you don't have to, make your own or anything like that. That's what they look like. And what I'll do is I'll put them on my cooking sheet, my baking sheet here, and then we'll fill them with the mixture that we made. You could eat them right away if you wanted like this, or if you want your phyllo dough to be a little crustier, a little crunchier, you can put them in the oven for 10 minutes. So we'll do that. All right. Last part here before I start scooping them into the little cups, I need to add my walnuts to the mixture. So we will mix that up. Again, that will give that good crunch to the apples. Give it that nutty flavor. All right, looks great. So we'll take this and then we'll spoon it into our little cups. And then it's easy as that. That's your holiday mini apple pies with walnuts that you can bring to your parties, make for your family. Or if you do like a baking trade at work, that's another great option. So I'm going to spoon this in to all of these quick, and we'll pop these in the oven because we need this pan for our third recipe. And our third recipe is also very quick, but also is something where you can use it in a variety of different ways and in different meals. You also could just eat this if you wanted to. I think this would taste good alone, like as a crisp. As just a dessert in a bowl would be great. These nice warm apples with the walnuts. All right. That looks great. I'm gonna pack these, maybe just a little bit more in this one here. Give you a little preview. Pop these in the oven for 10 minutes and then they are ready to go. And this is what they look like. They're really delicious and low in sugar, so they're a great holiday treat. I'm gonna eat one quick. Ten out of 10. Chef's kiss, delicious. All right, I have a little bit of compote left. So what I'm gonna do here is move it over to this bowl so that we can use this. And our third recipe we're gonna be making is candied walnuts. So with this one, it's really important to watch your pan heat because you can burn your walnuts very easily. So this has agave nectar in it as its sweetener, some cinnamon, some salt, and vanilla. And that agave nectar does need to get warmed up. So you want to make sure that your pan is warm, but not too warm to where you're going to burn your walnuts. I'll put these right here. I'll move this back over here. Get it turned back up. And let that get warmed up. And for this one, we're going to be using 2 cups of the walnuts. These ones are halves, so they're a little bit bigger than the chopped. But the nice thing about this recipe, so with the candied walnuts, is you can add them to your salads. You could put them in your soup. They're just a great addition of a sweet crunch that you could add to really any of your meals. I would even put this in an oatmeal. It tastes so good with the cinnamon. It's definitely going to add some elevated texture to any of your meals. All right, so in the pan, I'm going to leave some of the extra like cinnamon and other little bit of the butter flavoring and stuff from the previous recipe in here. So 2 cups of your halved walnuts. Those are good. Mix here. And then we're adding a 1/4 cup of agave nectar. And this you can find by all the other sweeteners, honey, it's in our baking aisle. Good. We're gonna add vanilla. You can use fresh vanilla. I think the recipe calls for a pinch of vanilla bean, or you can use a half of a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then we've got a eighth of a teaspoon of salt and an eighth of a teaspoon of cinnamon. I'm going to turn this up just a tad. And the big thing here is you want to make sure you're stirring consistently. So you can get everything mixed together, evenly coated, but also making sure that you're not burning your walnuts. And you want to make sure that that agave nectar will start to thicken and it gets really sticky. And that's a good sign. It's starting to bubble a little bit, and that's what you want to see your agave nectar doing. Then you know that you're on the right path to getting these walnuts candied. But the one thing is typically when you do a candied nut, they're fried. So this is a baked way of doing it. So you're not using any excess oil or anything like that. All right. While these are thickening up, I will show you what they look like after the mixture has thickened. So here are the candied walnuts. You see they've got that kind of shining coating on them. So really delicious and really great to add to different entrees or sides. The thing here too is you want to make sure once they're done cooking here for the 4 to 5 minutes and getting coated in this sauce is that you want to make sure you put them either on a silicone mat or line a cookie sheet with parchment paper to prevent them from sticking to any, plate or just directly on the cooking sheet. You want to make sure that they're not going to stick, and this creates an easier cleanup for you. The other thing is it takes about 20 minutes for them to cool. I just let mine cool sitting out here on the counter, but they probably cool a little bit faster if you stuck them in the freezer or the refrigerator. But once they're candied like this, they're good for up to 2 weeks as long as you're storing them in an airtight container. So I'm going to continue to stir these while these are candying. But again, I think walnuts are just such a great tool to be added to any of our meals throughout the day. There's so many health benefits to walnuts, and it doesn't take you eating a lot to get that nutrition benefit. Just a quarter cup or a handful to get the nutrition benefits from walnuts is really impactful. Magnesium is also such a big trending word in nutrition right now, and great benefits for sleep too. And it's great because they have protein and fiber. And as we know, protein and fiber are great for satiety, but they're also great for helping blood sugar spikes. So if we're looking to, have more of a maintained blood sugar, protein and fiber are really important factors in that. All right, these are getting pretty candied up, getting sticky. I can see that agave getting stickier here on these walnuts. So what I'm going to do here in a minute is put them on top of those, and they'll sit, and then you can easily break them apart. All right. Scoop these on here. Another thing you can do too is toast your walnuts if you like to have more of a toasted flavor. And how you do that is you can preheat your oven to 350 and pop them in the on a baking sheet for 5 minutes, and you'll get more of that like toasted walnut flavor. All right. I am going to add these to my soup later for lunch. I'm excited about that. Okay. Right. So we have our candied walnuts, our mini apple pies, and then we have our walnut compote over our brie. So three really easy dishes to whip up here. Holiday parties to, I know Thanksgiving just passed, but even, for Thanksgiving or any of the holidays that you have coming up, just a fun treat to have at home. I want to thank California Walnuts for sponsoring this session and offering up all these great recipes that we get to share with you. And looking forward, we do have another cooking demo next week with the United Dairy Institute of Michigan. So we'll be showcasing some fun dairy recipes next week. So look forward to seeing you all again. Hope everyone has a great holiday season.